course, you've got the big story, which may not be in the listed space, but definitely worth a mention, and this one is NSE. We understand that NSE is making an attempt once again to list itself with a fresh proposal going to the exchanges. Sajid, of course, who tracks us closely, is standing with us. Sajid, I know there may not be too much of retail participation in NSE, but every family office, every significant investor with quantum of money is exposed to NSE or has scrambled to get NSE in more ways than one. While they are going back and going to give this another attempt, third time lucky, I don't know whether that's going to happen for them, there are concerns. And we've also seen data, I believe, where FPIs have been consistently selling their stake in NSE for the last 6 months. The last time a foreign participant actually picked up NSE was all the way back in Jan. Prices, I know, have been moving gradually higher, but that has nothing to do with the fact that it's been tough, and who knows whether they're going to hit the jackpot this time around.
That's true, but to answer that question about FPIs and the family offices,
family offices are holding on
to it, and FPIs are selling, and many of the family offices and domestic funds, especially opportunity funds which are looking ahead of IPOs, are picking up.
From what I even know, I think it was the IFL Opportunities Fund 2,
yes,
which also has a significant exposure to NSE.
To that. Radhakrishnan, the money is 1.58%.
But having said all this, there is an overhang. Because at the end of the day, you want an exit. Your money is only as good if you get that price at exit, right?
Yeah, and the fact that no one can easily get a stake in NSE because every stake purchase has to go through a board approval. There's a fit and proper criteria which is there. So even if you want to buy a stake, one share of NSE, which is currently valued at 5,500 rupees in the market or in the OTC market, you still need a board approval to.
And I guess that's why this is restricted to the larger families that own NSE.
So the thing is. There's an ongoing, to give a perspective, there's an ongoing case which is in Delhi High Court, and the Delhi High there's a PIL which was filed asking SEBI to speed up the entire IPO process. As part of that, SEBI had put out some reservations saying that there are a couple of things that needs to be done. The first one was a co-relocation case, because of which the entire IPO got derailed, and then secondly there was a technology issue because we've seen quite a few disruptions that happening in NSE. Those two things having been addressed, and maybe at the advanced stages as we speak, the regulator said that for us to give an approval, they have to file an application. Right. They haven't even filed an application, so how do we give an approval? So what NSE has now done is that yesterday there was a shareholders meet where they have announced to the shareholders that the board has approved filing an application with the sector regulator, which in this case is SEBI, seeking to file a DRHP for an IPO. That has been done, but that's the first step. The SEBI will have to come back and give an NOC. Post that, NSE will have to prepare a DRHP, which is again a at least a 6 months process, because filing a DRHP requires a lot of that, and then the SEBI scrutiny. So we are looking at an IPO which is at least a year and a half away. But the first step is the NOC, which comes from SEBI. Once the SEBI NOC comes in, then things move forward there. The bigger issue there is is the thing that, and this time around there is a chance that the IPO may go through because there's a court process in place, and the PIL basically seeks approval for the IPO through a court process. The regulator has been very reluctant in giving that approval, and the reason being that there are multiple investigation agencies who are involved in this who are investigating the co-location thing and the dark fiber issue. All those things are there, right. And so the regulator doesn't want to take a decision pending those investigation from those agencies. But if there is a court convened or court directed process, the IPO can proceed, and all this can be made as a disclosure to the DRHP.
I'm going to ask you this because I know you've tracked this very closely, and very recently we did a BSE versus NSE in terms of earnings as well. And just to add some perspective, all the way back in 2021, the number of families in India that owned NSE was a mere 65 odd. Today, the number of local domestic families that own it in India stands at 4,000 5,300. So that's the increase in allocation that Indian families have to NSE. Well, also just to, pardon me, it was 650, that is now 4,300. Sajid, while I know that there is a long and much awaited IPO and that's when the kicker will come in, how concerned are you as somebody who tracks this counter in terms of the derivative volumes dropping, the fact that there is increased competition from a BSE? We've seen the earnings were not bad, but the fact remains IPO is one thing, business fundamentals is the other thing. Comfortable with that, or do you feel like...
So, it's going to be a sector-wide impact, right? Means as and when the FNO comes into play, there will be impact not only on discount brokers, the traditional brokers and the stock exchanges. Plus the true to label criteria will also have an impact across the board for all of them. If I'm not wrong, NSE has already clarified to the shareholders that the impact of FNO could be as much as 25% to the earnings. So that is something which we need to look at, and if NSE is getting a 25% hit on the earnings, BSE would get not a similar one but a lower one, because BSE doesn't have that much of a market share in the derivative market. But the issue is that BSE is trading at 35 times FY26 earnings, which gives it 3,100 rupees or something. That's a price band which is there. If you put the same multiple of 35 times to NSE, that price of NSE, which is currently at 5,500, it goes to 7,000 rupees.
Right.
So from a 2.7 lakh crore current valuation that it gets, it goes to almost 3.5 lakh crores if you put the same multiple of BSE. So the trigger for NSE investors, or we'll see the off-market trading again picking up the moment the NOC comes through for the IPO.
You will start seeing an increase in demand.
Demand again coming.
And then the prices are all over the place.
So just want to also point out that BSE has the advantage of a low base right now. Their FNO segment is relatively new, and which is why their growth rates are
going to be much higher.
Looking at their growth rates are looking higher. But I'm looking at the NSE growth rate as well on a year-on-year basis for the year gone by, and they're around 25%, 26% on year-on-year, and this is on an already high base. So NSE continues to enjoy that kind of traction when it comes to this increased participation. In general, of course, once it lists, it's going to be a wait and watch as to what price to earnings valuation it gets. But as Sajid was mentioning, it's currently at 5,500 rupees per share. If you actually value it at BSE,
it's going to be
valued at 7,000.
But it's a little bit like the Zomato Swiggy story, right? It's about listed versus unlisted.
The point is that BSE had an EPS of 19 rupees for FY24, and in the first quarter itself, it did an EPS of 19.
Right.
So, we're looking at around 75-80 rupees for EPS for BSE in FY25 and 88 rupees of EPS going into FY26, given the fact that you have all those disruptions coming in.
My only concern on NSE is that, okay, once we get this NOC, the listing does happen over the course of 1 year. You have investors who've held on to this stock for 4 to 5 years at an average.
No, I've been tracking for 10 years. So there are investors who have been after it, after IPO for almost 10 years now.
And we have about 5,000 odd local investors who are in families that are invested in it. Your Ramesh Damani's also being part of it. What happens post-listing? Because you've stayed on this counter for so long, waiting for it to list and give you an exit. I would imagine that once this even hits the market, if it does and when it does, it may not be able to catch up with BSE's valuations, because there will be exits that investors would want to mark, because beyond 5 to 10 years...
Maybe investors may choose not to exit if they are trading at those valuations. They expect there isn't enough of a runway. Remember that BSE will also have to catch up eventually at some point in time once that base effect comes into play. And we're not looking at a 1 year, 2 year game. I'm sure a lot of these investors who have already been in NSE for the last 10 years are likely to stay with NSE for another 10 as well.
Oh, well, let's wait and watch, and let's hope that NSE gets lucky third time around. This one is going to be significant. And of course, like Sajid said, even if this goes through a listing for at least another year, is not what expected.